Hello and welcome to today's Love Profiles webinar on taking the stress out of wedding planning using personality type insights. I am going to share the screen here. Let's get started. After chatting with some engaged couples, here's what I found. There is a good chance that the stress that you're experiencing right now around planning your wedding is taking you away from the feeling of connection and compatibility you had when you got engaged. Whoever said this was the happiest time of your life obviously didn't tell you how many people have an opinion on what you should do, how difficult it is to stick to your guns without offending anyone, and the sheer amount of decisions that you have to make. So if you're here because you just got engaged, you look forward to getting married, you know and love and like your partner, but planning the wedding is bringing out maybe another side of them you haven't seen before, another side of you haven't seen before. If you want to make sure that you start your life together in a way that you want it to continue on the same page, you're in the right place. Even if you just got engaged and are blissfully happy, I still invite you to stay on this webinar because you might learn something to keep the magic going long term. So what we'll talk about today is I'll take you through a very quick type pattern quiz where you can hopefully find out what your pattern for this particular model is and how your partner might be different. And I'm saying that because obviously the type self-discovery that I actually do with my clients takes about an hour and a half. So we're just going to get to a little piece, but it should already be quite helpful. We'll apply that knowledge to the wedding planning process so you can take away and implement any insights straight away. There will be time for Q&A, and then at the end of our time together, I will tell you how to get more support moving forward if that's what you're interested in. So in case we haven't met before, this is my little introductory slide. Just quickly who I am to be talking about this. I was born and raised in Germany. I have a bachelor's degree in human resources management from Stirling University in Scotland. And since moving to the States, I've been coaching and training using personality type and cross-cultural lenses. I actually used to work with expat couples a lot. So if my accent sounds a bit weird, that's probably why. I've moved around a lot and have definitely come a long way since that strawberry hut 25 years ago. My husband and I do watch way too much TV, and that's us on our wedding day in the photo. He's from Spain, by the way, so we are very different on very many levels. And that's a story for another day because we are here to talk about you. Does having different communication and decision-making styles make you feel misunderstood or disconnected and frustrated sometimes in your relationships? Maybe you've even started wondering if they're trying to annoy you on purpose. I'm on record as saying that type saved my marriage because now I know my husband isn't trying to piss me off on purpose. It's literally just the way his brain is wired. And bonus, he now understands the same about me. I told you we got married in 2007, and around 3 years in, we hit a really rough patch and just could not find a way to bridge the gap. With the help of a therapist, we eventually did. And it didn't occur to me until afterwards that so many of our differences that took us years to figure out, our type patterns explain them literally within minutes. I already knew about type. I was certified in MBTI in 2008. I became a master practitioner in 2010, but I had never thought to put our type preferences next to each other with direct comparisons and tips on how to bridge the gap. We had to go through the drama and come out the other end to be able to see ourselves more clearly. And since then, for the last 10 years and counting, we've learned how to use type insights to help us have the difficult conversations and how to get back on the same page a lot quicker. Even when we've moved around and across the United States, even when he was laid off, even when we were going through a health crisis, and even now that we are together 24/7 due to COVID, and I'm a raging extrovert. So earlier this year, I designed Your Love profiles, comparing 2 type profiles side by side with a focus on relationship issues. It takes a couple of steps where I go individually with each partner through the self-discovery process to find out what their best fit type patterns are. I then custom prepare a report for you and your partner's type preferences side by side. We have a debrief session where we talk about the similarities and differences and how your brains are wired and how those show up in the relationship. These are 2 couples that I've worked with and their comments, and as you can see, they found it really helpful. They've asked for more also, which is why I decided to create a workbook and coaching sessions around the top 5 areas for relationships and specifically how to prepare to have a happy marriage. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but I want to take you through this mini experience right now. So if you can get your thinking caps on, the questions that I'm going to pose you here, the point is that you can please answer from a place of who you've always been, not who you have to be at work or who you have to be at home or who your parents told you you were or who you want to be after your next PhD, right? Let's just be honest with ourselves. There's no wrong answers. This is just for you. Self-discovery process. So this is how I start all my interaction styles workshop. The model that we're looking at is interaction styles. I set up 4 flip charts in the corners and then ask people to position themselves by them, which you can do from the comfort of your home. It's worth it to go ahead and act or decide. It's worth it to think ahead to reach the goal. It's worth it to involve everyone and get them to want to. It's worth it to integrate and reconcile many inputs. Please take a note of which of these statements resonates with you the most. This is, one data point towards finding your best fit type pattern. And if you can't decide on a single one, that's okay. As you learn more about each style, hopefully you'll be able to narrow it down. Did you have a time to take it down? So act or decide, think ahead to reach the goal, involve everyone, integrating many inputs. Choose which one describes you best. And then we continue talking about communication dynamics. So some people have a directing communication style and some people have an informing communication style. Consider this example. A son walks into the kitchen. The father stands by the fridge and says, "Hey son, we're out of milk." The son responds, "That's okay, I'll drink orange juice." What do you think happened there? What tends to happen is that we go through the world expecting people to be like us. We treat others the way we want to be treated, and that's a great start, but it's not very effective when you're dealing with people who are different. And newsflash, especially when we're looking at personality type, not everybody is like you. So the golden rule doesn't always work very well, and the platinum rule is better, which is treat others the way they want to be treated. And in order to do that, you need self-awareness and other awareness, and that's what these models help facilitate. So when you are trying to get someone to do something, that is the question. How do you go about it? Do you come straight out and tell them, which would be directing, or are you a little more circumspect, which would be informing? Communication happens on a continuum. There are situations that fall on the extremes, but in everyday interactions, you probably fall somewhere in the middle, and both styles have their moment. For example, when the house is on fire, it would be cruel to inform someone that they are about to feel hot. And when your spouse is asking for help, it's probably inappropriate to micromanage and tell them exactly what they should be doing. So it's best to practice a blended approach, and you probably use both styles depending on your role and the relationship and the context that you're in. But I'm asking you to decide which is more you, which sounds more like you. And here we have a little more information to help you make your decision. So to figure out your innate preferences, think about what comes most naturally to you. in my work with couples and also leaders, when they say things like, I have to take a breath and consciously think about how to be nice and less direct, that indicates to me that they're great team players, but their natural communication style is probably directing. And that's okay. Same with people who say, I have to really pay attention and actually say what I want people to do. Again, you're probably very nice, and your natural communication style sounds like it's informing. And that's what we're trying to get to, your natural innate preference. Everybody can do both, but one is preferred. So again, don't answer from what you have to do or what you wish you were better at, but what you're actually doing. An example from wedding planning would be, how do you discuss what you want? Do you tell your partner what you need them to do? Or do you tell them what an ideal wedding would look like for you and expect them to fill in the blanks? When you're ready, let's move on to the next data point. These processes that we're looking at now are roles. When we first meet people, we have a choice to set the pace and the tone of the interaction. Again, you probably do a little bit of both, depending on the person and the situation, but there should be one side you're leaning more towards that comes more naturally and that doesn't zap, but actually gives you energy. Initiating roles are about making the first move, introducing yourself, starting up a conversation. It's often seen as being assertive or one-up, but is more about an attempt to get the interaction going and involving others in conversation. So this mostly corresponds with the extraversion preference that you might have heard of. Extraversion and introversion are pretty, I think, familiar in the vernacular today. So a responding role preference would involve waiting for the other person to make the first move. This is often seen as being reticent or one down, but it's more about wanting to allow the other person to be free to respond the way they want to. So again, this is corresponding more or less with a preference for introversion. Which one resonates most? A wedding planning example would be, what is your vendor selection process like? Do you actively go out and contact them to set up interviews and consults? Or in an ideal world, would you rather put out a request and then review incoming offers to make your decision? Initiating or responding, you can take a note of your preference. And we'll move on to the next one, focus dynamics. These look at how we tend to pay attention to different aspects of interactions and collaborations. People with an outcome focus say things like, let's get it done now. Let's make sure we have everything in place that we need. It's about influencing or having control over the result. People with a process focus say things like, what's the plan? Or let's go ahead and get started and then go with the flow. They're more about seeing the process as essential to getting where you want to go. But having a process doesn't mean you get stuck in the process. It's just about having a plan, maybe at milestones or a course of action. So a wedding planning example would be, how do you approach your vision of the big day? Do you have a specific expectation and do everything you can to make that one happen? Or are you happy to make a plan and then reassess as time goes on, as circumstances change, and adapt to the flow as needed? And again, what comes most naturally, not what you want to do or what you think you should be doing. Okay, so outcome or process. Now this one looks a little complicated, but we're going to talk through it. Actually, sorry. No, we talked about the example for wedding planning, right? The vision of the big day. So these three dynamics are part of the processes that make up the so-called interaction styles patterns. This model was developed by Dr. Linda Behrens, and it's one of the MBTI alternatives that I'm certified to facilitate. The 4 patterns in the 4 corners are in charge, chart the course, behind the scenes, and get things going. And we'll look at the characteristics side by side on the next page. Just to talk you through it again, in case it isn't clear, if you chose a directing communication style, initiating roles and an outcome focus, that would put you in the in charge pattern. If you chose an informing communication style, an outcome focus, and a responding role preference, that would put you in the behind the scenes field. Does that make sense? So if you have maybe 2 out of 3, then that's fine too. That might be, the main indication. And again, we're going to look at a couple more details on the next page to help you clarify. Okay, so let's do that now. Let's apply these insights to the wedding planning process. Again, this is going to be a lot of information on one page, but I want you to have all the information next to each other so you can compare, especially if you're still sorting between 2 styles. Wedding planning is about making decisions towards a vision or a goal, right? Your personality type preferences mean you like to do things in a certain way. And now there is a tremendous emotional involvement because you're committing your lives to someone else, and they might have a different way to plan or even a completely different vision of the big day. So you're also navigating the dilemma of figuring out what it is that you actually want and reconciling that with what other people want. And stress is pretty much inevitable. An interaction style stress happens when we have to operate outside of our comfort zones for too long. So looking at how each pattern approaches decision-making and stress is right here. Again, the in-charge style has the directing communication style, an initiating role preference, and an outcome focus. And they like to get things accomplished, often through people. The phrase up top, it's worth the risk to go ahead and act or decide, would have been the statement to go with it. And because they like to get things accomplished, they tend to make quick decisions, usually with the confidence that they know what is needed. Because people with an in-charge interaction style believe that it's better to make a decision, even if the decision turns out to be a wrong one. You can make a new decision, but you have the closure and you get things done, you check them off your to-do list as soon as possible. For someone with the chart the course pattern, the belief is that it's worth the effort to think ahead to reach the goal. They also have a directing communication style. They have a responding role preference, so those would be the introverts. And they have a focus on the process as well. So people with a chart the course pattern love to have a course of action, a plan, milestones, several plans, and it's about making deliberate decisions, checking against an already thought out process. They like to focus on giving guidance, illuminating, clarifying for others, and then they analyze and figure out what needs to be done to get the desired result. So there's a definite direction. In charge is a little more get something done to feel accomplished. Chart the course is more get something specific done. Not just get anything done, but get something specific. Someone with a behind-the-scenes pattern has the core belief that it's worth the time to integrate and reconcile many inputs. The communication style is informing. The roles are responding, and the focus is on the result, on the outcome. Again, these are introverted styles. And someone with a behind-the-scenes preference is all about getting the best result possible. Not just anything, not just something specific, but the best result possible. And in order to do that, they try to make consultative decisions, integrating many sources of input. And they also like to define specifications to meet standards and apply principles. So in your wedding planning example, these people with a behind-the-scenes preference will delay making a final decision until the very last moment because they want to make sure that they're not missing anything vital new that might pop up. And in my own marriage, I have an in-charge interaction style, and my husband has a behind the scenes interaction style. So decision making is a topic that comes up a lot for us because I don't like limbo. I like closure. I respond well to boundaries. Like I said, if I make a mistake, I don't really care that much because I can always do something else. In my mind, I can change it. In my husband's mind, he doesn't want to make a mistake. He wants to make sure that he has all the information he needs to make the best possible decision the first time around. So I'm anxious until he makes that decision, right? And what seems to work in our marriage is that when the consequences of a wrong decision are not that significant, I go ahead and do it. When there is a larger investment at stake, we talk about the time frame that he might need to make the best possible decision. And then, so he doesn't just research forever. There is a deadline attached to it so that I can calm my nervous inner voices and saying, okay, I may not get decided today, but it will get decided next Wednesday. Does that make sense? And then he goes off and does his research. And I know that we're going to, buy the best possible Hoover or get the best possible computer, whatever it might be. So people with a get things going pattern have an informing communication style. Initiating, they're also the in charge and get things going are the extroverts of the bunch. And they have a process focus and they believe that it is worth the energy to involve everyone and get them to want to. People with this style like sharing insights about what something means and what is really going on. They are very attuned to the needs of other people and to the motivations of other people. They like to make collaborative decisions that ensure buy-in, which might take, again, a little time to get everybody on board for the same, to agree on something. They focus on interactions to get more from the group than group members can get individually. And they get the energy moving towards an embraced result. So if this is you, in a wedding planning situation, this might look like certain frustration because you won't be able to please everyone generally. So here, somebody with a couple with chart the course and get things going preferences is going to be nicely complementary, again, like an in charge and behind the scenes as well. The differences on the surface may be frustrating in the moment, but what I hope this is illustrating is that this is literally how our brains are wired. This is just what we do, and this is just, how we tend to do it. If we're not thinking about it, if we're just operating out of standard procedure, and we don't have the language to say, okay, I'm actually after a desired result right now, when you're looking for the best result, how can we collaborate on this? So I hope this is giving you some sort of language to start, and not a negotiation process, but to have different conversations about how to make decisions for your weddings that incorporate pleasing as many people as needed, and also celebrating and realizing the vision that you have for your big day, because at the end, it is your big day. Okay. Now, looking at, this was the decision-making piece. We're going to look at the stressing piece now. Understanding your pattern and your partner's pattern, or even your mother's pattern, if she's the one giving you lots of advice you never asked for, is the key to giving you options. Know thyself, and you'll have the tools to get yourself out of a lot of emotionally charged and triggering situations. And again, I find using this kind of language effective and neutral enough so that nobody gets offended, because you're not really pointing fingers, you're just stating, this is how I like to do things, can we work together? So let's walk through them. For people with an in-charge pattern, the core drive, remember, is to get results and to see that actions are taken. So what's stressful is feeling out of control and seeing nothing gets accomplished. When stressed, people with an in-charge pattern tend to get bossy and asserting. So they dial that pattern up a little bit and then flip into the opposite. Dialing up looks like getting bossy, getting assertive, getting, maybe a little angry before checking out, resentfully checking out. Not saying do whatever you want, but having thoughts about it, right? So if you're not hearing it now, you're going to hear it in a minute. So the energy is very much pushing against because there's energy behind it. If this is your pattern or the pattern of your loved one, you can help yourself or help them by explaining why things don't get done or not to the time frame that you thought they were. Help them see something is being done and by when. So sometimes this is also an exercise of managing expectations. If you thought you should be ready by now, but you aren't, have a look at what did get accomplished already. And maybe those things took time, or maybe there are extenuating circumstances that you hadn't taken into account when you made your, deadline planning the first time around. And then also join them in their humor. We can usually tell when we're being too aggressive, and then laughing kind of lightens the mood a little, and that's good. People with a chart the course pattern, remember, like to have a course of action and see movement and progress. So what's stressful to people with chart the course pattern is not knowing what is likely to happen and not seeing progress. So they like to be able to anticipate. When stressed, they tend to withdraw, distance themselves, and shut down. And then the flipping into the opposite would be insistent involvement and pushing and asking again. But the initial energy is to move away from, because really what somebody with the chart the course preference wants to do is get an overview of the lay of the land. And if something isn't working out the way they thought it was going to, they retreat back and look at the items and the pieces and the people again and say, okay, well, but what's to be expected? And you can help someone with chart the course preferences by being calm and direct, letting them know what to expect and when, and updating them on the progress. So don't make someone with a chart the course preference come to you and ask you where are we at, because that's going to be stressful for them. So you can preempt that by setting yourself a reminder, maybe daily, maybe weekly, to say, hey, here's where we are in the process. And this might be some advice that you can also apply to your job. If you're working for a boss who's seems to be micromanaging, you can preempt that by reminding them what you're already doing and where you're at. And most of all, be patient. The patience is also very important for people with behind-the-scenes preferences. Remember, they like to get the best result possible because they like to integrate and harmonize inputs from many different sources. So they get stressed when there's not enough input or not enough time to integrate the input. So it is being pressed to decide too quickly. Very stressful. When stressed, they tend to look like they agree and become very quiet. And the energy is kind of, okay, I'll go with it. When inwardly, they're probably churning. So the first instinct for someone with behind-the-scenes preferences might be to avoid the conflict until they can go no further, and then they take an absolutely rigid stance. And it's either, their way or the highway kind of thing. So to help someone with behind-the-scenes preferences out of stress is to be friendly, but not too expressive. Like, don't be all, super funny, gregarious or whatever in their face. Patiently providing information, calmly providing information and encouragement, and basically giving them time to reflect and integrate everything. So people with behind-the-scenes styles tend to get there's an emotional overwhelm that they need to self-soothe for a minute. And then people with get things going pattern, remember, like to be involved and involve others and move things along. So when they feel left out, that is really stressful for them. Or when they feel unliked or excluded, that is really stressful for them. And when they feel stressed, they tend to move towards others and maybe get overly expressive, again, dialing it up a little, but feeling scattered and panicky on the inside. And then, they're flipping into the opposite. They're the most authentic people, and authenticity is super important to them, but it can become phony under the stress. And then they also might just avoid people altogether. So helping someone with get things going preferences out of stress is listen as they talk things out, encourage them to share their opinions, encourage them to participate, and talking to them, like express your own ideas, express your own thoughts and feelings. And someone with get things going preferences, they might seem like they talk a lot, and you can't get a word in edgewise. And you might consider they're doing it because they're waiting for the interaction. So you might have to interrupt them so they see that you are engaged. Because just waiting for them to finish speaking means that to their minds, it means you have nothing to say, so they have to keep speaking, right? So just another thought there. Okay, so let me see. I hope you've had an insight or two. Were you able to land on your interaction style? Do you know how yours might be different from your partner's? Do you have an idea how you could use what we've talked about today to bridge the gaps? Here's what we talked about. We talked about how important it is to know yourself and your partner before making a lifetime commitment. I took you on a quick self-discovery to highlight how different types communicate, make decisions, and are stressed in different ways. And I told you a couple of stories of how knowing these differences helps reduce resentment, or at least how it helped reduce resentment in my marriage. And my point is, even more than understanding, appreciating your differences and what different personality types bring to the table, I think is really useful and, in my opinion, key to a happy marriage. I can be fully me, you get to be fully you, and we're co-creating something together that works for both of us. It's about complementing one another. Not everybody has to be the same. Now, I don't know why you showed up today. Maybe you already took a free test, but don't know how to combine that information for your relationship and translate the insights into action. Maybe you avoid addressing your differences altogether so as to not rock the boat. Or maybe things are going really well and you just want to make sure it stays that way, so you're looking for knowledge to help you avoid any pitfalls or get through them faster. Here's what I do know. You're an independent, whole, living system with patterns, processes, and preferences, and so is your partner. You're behaving in ways that make absolute sense for your type pattern, and so does your partner. So let's have none of this better half talk, okay? You're a person. You're capable of learning. You grow, you develop. And knowing your type preferences doesn't stick a label on you. It doesn't put you in a box. Actually, I don't even think it can predict behavior all the time or in many instances, but it does explain a lot of behavior. And I know from personal experience that the first step in better understanding your partner is creating that connection. So to enjoy a successful relationship, we have to make time to raise our own awareness and appreciate our differences. And again, I'm saying this from personal experience. I wish I had realized how useful and helpful type knowledge is to explain everyday annoyances sooner. I could have saved myself literally years of crying and arguing and both of us butting our heads against the wall. And here's how I can help you save that time. To celebrate our differences, we need reliable models that explain behaviors and motivations in an inclusive and positive way. We need practical strategies for development, practicing behaving in different ways, and a safe space to discuss what's showing up inside your relationship. So if you're on board with using Type Insights to really connect with your partner, if you even had one little aha moment today and would like to have about 20 more, if you want to take the next step and integrate your love profiles in the marriage you are co-creating, I want to invite you to participate in my premarital prep program. I hope this was helpful, and I want to thank you for your time and wish you a happy day and a happy relationship with yourself and with others. Bye-bye.